My name is Abdullah Hassan Pratt. I'm an emergency medicine physician at the new Level 1 Trauma Center at the University of Chicago, but I'm also from Chicago South Side. And when speaking on the subject of hustle is one of my favorite subjects to talk about because I think it's the one thing that ties deeply with resiliency. And that's a word that you'll hear a lot of administrators talk about is how resilient is this person, or this person comes from hardship background or underrepresented minority communities, so that must mean it confers some bit of resiliency. And this, in some instances, is true, I think, but it's a potential, just like any other potential energy. It's something that until you release it, until it's something that's potentiated, is not really something that works for you well until you understand how to use it. And so in today's video, I really wanted to touch on some tips into touching into your inner hustle. You know, I had a really close friend one time who was in college and she was pre-med and she was like, how do I really get over this hump? And at the time, Beyonce was tearing up the charts and I was like, girl, I knew she was like a huge Beyonce fan. I'm like, you gotta touch into that inner Sasha Fierce. And I think that all of us have our inner, Tupac, or our inner, hustle mentality that's really our inner Gucci Man, or, Yo Gotti, or whoever you listen to when you come from the streets. And I think that for me, as someone who does come from those kind of areas, it's the one place of solace that I return to whenever I notice that I'm straying off my path, whenever I notice that I'm kind of lost in who I want to be or what I want to be, or sometimes when I don't really know how to maneuver in life. And so one of the first things you have to do is understand where you come from, understand that you're a small piece in a long journey that your ancestors have come through, your parents, your grandparents, and most of the time the previous generations than us, whether you're a young woman, a young man of color, whether you're Latino, African American, oftentimes your preceding generations have gone through far much more than we have. And so I think that understanding that pathway, that Jim Crow in America was very tough, or apartheid South Africa, or different conflicts that may have been going on in Nigeria or the Caribbean in past generations really hardened our ancestors to come through them, that we can also do the same thing is one of the most foundational things that you can ever really understand. The way to do that is sometimes that means touching base with grandma if you have that opportunity, or your great uncle, or reading back some of your family albums if you have access to those things, to really ask people, say, what was that like? My mother would always tell me she grew up in Jim Crow South in Tuskegee, Alabama. She was the first black woman to get an MBA from Texas A&M. And she can always tell me, I remember being a small child and her telling me the stories of the fox and the wolf. That, up north, one thing that she noticed is that the racism was like a fox. They smile at you, they'd be nice to you, and then they'd be undercutting you, they'd be backstabbing, and they'd be very racist, as Martin Luther King saw when he came to Cicero, Chicago, in Illinois. But then in the South, you had the wolf, which didn't really smile at you, snarled at you, but was also equally intended on harming you. And I think that for students of color to be able to tap into those prior generations where bigotry, racism was very difficult is important. But she would tell me stories about how when she'd come from class, she'd go to the cafeteria, she'd be an all-A student, sit down at a cafeteria lunch table, and that whole group of tables would just get up in unison and walk away. Or that, how resources, everybody had the study guide to the test except her. And these are things that we may complain about now, but back then that was overt. Nobody hid that stuff. It wasn't, something to really, laugh at. It was very serious. So when I get in the situations where I think I may be being profiled, or I may be being treated unfairly based on my race or where I come from or how I talk, I oftentimes can talk to her and she can not remind me that my experiences are small, but remind me how powerful I am to be able to overcome them, and talk to me about the skills that it takes to poise, reminding yourself of the true goal. Another tip that I would really say, other than understanding your history, is really staying rooted to those who you grew up with. Those people who've known you the longest is extremely important. Unless you're someone who's moved from a faraway place, if you live where you grew up, I oftentimes don't trust people who don't hang out with people that have known them their whole life, because it means that you don't really retain friendships well. Because oftentimes, if I'm really worried about whether I'm being successful, whether I'm the person I want to be, I can go back to people, regardless of what they do now in life, that have known me since I was, 5, 6, 7 years old, and we come up and they can say, you know what, bro, you used to talk about this back then. I think you're right where you need to be. Or, no, man, you told me that this is where you were going to be at this point. Are you there? Are you really making that move like you thought you were going to be making? And so that's usually my compass that I can go back to. And an extreme example of this is that though I'm a young black physician and though I may have accolades and people may, say, pat me on the back for different things, oftentimes my biggest supporters growing up were the people you least expect. It was the local drug dealers, the gangbangers that knew I was an athlete or knew that I was, wanted to have a career doing science, and they support that kind of thing. They'd be like, yo, bro, you ain't supposed to be out here, man. Like, don't let us tell your brother that you out here. Your dad, your dad, one of the OGs, man. He don't want you out here. We rooting for you. How we gonna come to your game this Friday if you getting in trouble out here with us? And so, they oftentimes supported back then, and now even as an adult, they've all matured for the most part. I can go back to them and explain to them a certain scenario with an interview that I'm having or a certain tough issue with my research or something, and once they understand the pieces on the chessboard, they can oftentimes help you navigate in a way with that street smarts that other people around you may not, because they know you, they understand your hustle, they understand your genuine passion. They'll say, listen, all you got to do is focus on this, or if you know this person over here, make sure you don't burn your bridges with them, make sure that you're building a good connection with them, and then don't ask them for nothing. Just keep working, keep hustling, keep making their name look good for working with you. And then there will come a time where you might need a favor, where you might need someone to do something solid for you, and you'll find out they've been doing it the whole time without you even knowing it. Instead of somebody talking bad about you behind your back, they're talking good about you, and it's helping you build things in the future. So I would say always touch base with those who have known you, your cousin, your best friends that go way back. They can oftentimes ground you in a way that people who just met you or have only been around you for a little period of time can't. Another tip that I would give people in terms of really tapping into that inner grind, that inner hustle, would be using your former self as a mirror to who you are and who you're trying to be. And so what that means for me is that oftentimes I keep those old personal statements that I wrote to get into a summer internship in college, that I wrote to get into medical school and into residency. And I really try to hold myself accountable to that young person. If I talked about wanting to fight healthcare disparities, if I noticed that my works haven't really been in that area for a little bit, then that's time to say, man, I'm letting this person down. Or was I lying? Was I just trying to overcome and get accepted? These are the kind of things that I use to second guess where I am, and to kind of use it as a compass to help me move forward. If you journaled in the past, sometimes going back and looking at your old journals or your old vlogs or something that you may have said about yourself is a really, really good way to recalibrate yourself as you kind of navigate through some of your tougher times. One of the final tips that I really, really give people, in the most important, the truly, truly most important, and it ties into these other concepts, is remind yourself why you're doing it. What are you in the game for? If you said that, listen, I want to help underserved populations, then it's that underserved population that needs you, right? We're not in this just for ourselves. Yes, we want to have a career. You don't want to want for anything. You don't want to have to struggle in life, and I get that. But at the core root of things, most of us would be wanting to be a physician or studying to be a physician for free. And actually, we kind of are. We're paying for it, most of us. But I would say that if you really, really love what you want to do, oftentimes reminding yourself of that small person who, doesn't know anything about medicine, doesn't know anything about what's the difference between a student, a resident, any of those things. When you walk in their room and they look like you, that little old grandma looks like you on the wards, and you say, I'm student doctor XYZ, or I'm, intern doc XYZ, when you see the way that their faces light up, knowing that they've got someone who looks like their niece or their nephew or their grandchild who's in a position that they wouldn't have fathomed, you got to remind yourself that that's why you do what you do. You are here because you want to fight through, bust down the doors, and really advocate for people who, in many instances, don't have anyone advocating for them. When you do that, then it makes studying for step 1 and step 2 a little bit easier. It makes, for myself, studying for boards a little bit easier to know that there are those who depend on me to be my best self and to really get through these times. They know that those times are tough. They assume it. That's why they say they're proud of you. They're not proud of you just for the position you hold. People oftentimes will come and say they're proud of you because they know that it took a lot to get through that, and they assume that you're up for it. And so we have to make sure that we're following through on those things. But those are really my 4 or 5 really, really strong tips that I really touch into when I'm in lack of a little bit of hustle, I need a little bit more of that grind, that early me to get me over the humps and the hurdles that may be in my way towards ultimately succeeding in life and in my career.